He is one of the all time great stay at home defensemen, a true Iron Man, and a former captain. Brad Marsh, Joe Tilley's Great Canadian Sports Show. Coming up! Our guest today hails from London, Ontario, now calls Collingswood, New Jersey home. He is a two-time OHL All-Star. He was named the OHL's top defenseman. He won 2 medals with the Canadian junior team. He was drafted by Atlanta, 11th overall in 1978. He was captain of the Atlanta and Calgary Flames, a former NHL All-Star. He played 1,086 NHL games over 15 seasons with the Flames, Flyers, Leafs, Red Wings, and Senators. He is the second last player to not wear a helmet, a member of the London Sports Hall of Fame, and now the Director of Community Development for the Philadelphia Flyers. Welcome to the program, Brad Marsh. Good to have you here.
Well, Joe, how you doing? Happy to be here.
Yeah, it's good to see you, man. You're looking good.
Well, I try to stay ahead of the game. I still ride my bike. I still exercise, and like I said, try to stay ahead of the game. I got 7 grandkids. I got to keep up to them.
Right, that keeps you busy, no
Yeah,
doubt about it. I got a couple of those, but not 7. That's
yeah,
that's a lot.
yeah.
So yeah, so you grew up in London, Ontario. Tell us about your foray into the game of hockey.
Well, yes, London, Ontario, 178 Baseline Road West, and we played minor hockey, and it was long before these travel teams that are now formed with the AAA, AA, and all that stuff. And you travel the world to play minor hockey. We played for the Southwest London Bobcats, and it was just a little section of town, and we played against East London, we played against Stony Brook, and so on and so on. So we just played within our town. And my first minor hockey experience was on the open pond, like most of your guests of my age that you would have on your show. And when I started playing organized hockey, my Saturday morning practice or game would interrupt my game of shinny on the corner pond with everybody in the neighborhood. And so it was just a great memories of growing up in London and playing. And it was just a wonderful experience because you basically stayed with your same group of friends all the way up through uh, Tyke and Squirt and Pee Wee and Bantam. And like even now, they don't call them. It's, you know, U8, U9, U10. And I don't even know what group is what anymore, in minor hockey. But wonderful time in London, Ontario.
And you stayed a long time in London because you got a chance to play your junior career there as well. So recently, well, a few years back, you're inducted into the London Sports Hall of Fame. You also had your number 22 retired by the Knights. What do you remember most about your time with the London Knights? You and Rob Ramage, by the way, anchored the best blue line in junior hockey at the time. That was a hands down, maybe one of the greatest blue line tandems of all time in junior hockey.
Oh, we used to like to refer to ourselves as the Iron Curtain. But no, playing for London was pretty special. Back in those days, a junior team could protect 6 players within their limit. And so that's why I got to play with the Knights. I played junior B with their London Squires and then moved up to the London Knights. They changed that rule because the Toronto Marlies were in the league at the time, and they were protecting the 6 best players out of millions. And then you'd look at like the Sioux Greyhounds or Sudbury or the smaller cities, and they're protecting their 6 best out of 75,000 or whatever the population was at the time. And so it went to a draft a couple years later. I forget the exact year, but as you said, I was fortunate to play for the London Knights, and it was pretty cool to be playing for the hometown Knights. Great franchise back then. It continues to be a model franchise in the junior ranks now.
First round draft pick of the Atlanta Flames, later the Calgary Flames, of course. What was it like in Atlanta back in the day playing pro hockey?
Well, the draft was in Montreal, and it wasn't the big production that it is now. the players didn't go down, but at that time, Al Eagleson was a number of he was basically the only agent in the game at that time. Norm Kaplan was another agent. So basically, there's two agents to look after all the players. And for the first time ever in 1978, they took a few of the players that were projected to go in the first round or higher up in the first round. There's only 16 picks at that time, I believe. And so I went down, and my parents were there, and we just it was in the hotel there, and we just sat in the audience, if you will. So there's nothing going up to the stage to get a jersey or anything. And I heard my name, the Atlanta. There was rumors. Eagles told me prior to the draft, there was rumors that Cleveland was still in the league, was going to take me. But then they folded the morning of the draft and merged with Minnesota. You remember that? So that one was crossed off the list. And then, you said Detroit, was interested. But then anyhow, I ended up with the Atlanta Flames, and I just sat in the audience with my parents, and that was pretty cool. And then we went to the Barbie Barn to celebrate. We had me and my dad had a couple of beers and a big rack of ribs. I'm sure a lot of your listeners and yourself possibly have been to the Barbie Barn in Montreal. And I got to be honest, at the time, I was a little disappointed. Don't take that the wrong way. Obviously, you got drafted into the National Hockey League is cool, but this was long before TV, long before anything. And as a Canadian kid growing up in London, Ontario, the Toronto Maple Leafs were my team, and of course, you knew of the original six and so on and so on. And Atlanta, we had to do a little double to Atlanta, like the hell we
Really?
can do Atlanta. And but in saying that, it turned out to be wonderful for my first experience in the NHL. The Atlanta Flames fans were avid and rabid and loud, and it was a real cool experience playing down in Atlanta. But we were sold in 1980. But anyhow, the draft was real special. Special looking back that I got to share it with my parents in a private moment, as opposed to the TV cameras that are around in all the pro sports now, and it's a production, and so it was a real special moment. I remember getting home to London, and I searched high and low. Like now, the NHL team goes to a draft. I don't know how many jerseys they have in their bag, because they don't know where they're going to, what player is
Right.
going to fall to them, and all. So they go to the draft with I'm exaggerating, hundreds of jerseys, but you get my point. And so, as I said, there's no jersey presentation or whatever. And, I get home to London, and I went to Ray J. Watson Sports and bought my own Atlanta Flames jersey. And then I went to Pete James. There's a name from the sports broadcasting past. Pete James from London, Ontario, went to CFBL, and he interviewed me. And I bought my own jersey, for heaven's sakes. But it was cool. And then once again, I'm hopscotching around back to the draft. I didn't meet Cliff Fletcher, who was the general manager of the Atlanta Flames, and David Poyle, who was the assistant general manager, and the coach was Fred Creighton. We didn't meet them until the draft was over and into the night, and we went up, and basically I agreed to a contract that night. Cliff had said, "This is what we're going to do," and obviously Al Eagleson was there, and so first round draft pick, I got $55,000 in 1978, and I was happier than a you know what and you know what.
Yeah.
But anyhow, then away we went. So it was a wonderful experience, as I've said a couple of times.
Well, it wasn't long before the Flames moved to Calgary, of course, and they weren't exactly a playoff powerhouse at that point. I think the postseason record for the Flames when he made the move was 2-15. And here's how a young Brad Marsh assessed that team heading into the playoffs.
No, I guess, that's what every press person's saying, we're starting to play like we did last year or the previous years when we were in Atlanta. But the guys are looking at it. We just had a 5-game slump, and everyone knows we played bad. Everyone knows we were terrible. So we're going to turn it around ourselves, and we're just going to think that we're not the same team that we were in Atlanta.
There we
You
go.
were captain of the. Yeah, look at that head of hair too, eh? Like,
Yeah.
wow.
Yeah. Yeah, I remember that, not the specific interview, but in Atlanta, what was ironic is if you take away the first couple of expansion years, we were a really good team. The one year when I was there, we finished 6th overall. And we had some good players. We had Willie Platt, Rookie of the Year, Eric Bale, Rookie of the Year, Phil Russell on defense, Dan Bouchard in net, Pat Riggin, my ex-teammate, London
Right.
Knights in net. We had a really good team, but for whatever reason, things did not click in the playoffs. My first year, it was the infamous 2 out of 3, and we lost to the Toronto Maple Leafs. And in 2 games, they beat us the first game in Atlanta, and then the next game was up in Toronto, and it ended up being this big brawl-filled game, and an awful way to end my first year, if you will. Then the next year we lost to the Rangers, and that's when the wheels got in motion, to sell the team. As I said, we had great fans. They had no corporate sponsorship per se compared to the other pro sports in Atlanta. And back then, the owners didn't give a rat's ass about the welfare or the well-being of the league or the individual teams within the league. All they cared about was their own team and their own profits. They never worked together. And so anyhow, the owner at the time, it really wasn't up for sale, but Nelson Scalbania walked in and put an offer on that he couldn't refuse. And away we went to Calgary, and it was awesome.
Well, yeah, because things changed right away. That season, you guys won a Paris series. You swept Chicago, and then you came from behind to knock off a pretty good Flyers team. What do you remember about that great playoff run?
Well, that was really cool to play. Well, first of all, when we beat Chicago, what a monkey off. Not so much my back. I'd only been there for the 2 years, and but for the veterans that were on the team, Cliff Fletcher and so on and so on, what a monkey off the back. And then all of a sudden we're against the Broad Street Bullies, and it was kind of neat playing the Bullies. We got up 3-1. They won game 5 back in Philadelphia, then game 6 in Calgary. They won that game, and everyone had us written off. Oh, we're done. We're not going to beat the Broad Street Bullies. Game 7, back in the Spectrum, Kate Smith singing, and so on and so on. And we went in and we beat them in Game 7. And I'll remember there's two things about the Game 7 is Willie Plett not Willie Plett, no, Ben Wilson. Ben Wilson took a gloving. He grabbed the puck, and he basically was like a running back with it. And the ref gave him 2 minutes holding the puck, and we scored on that power play. And it was like, whew, and kind of a little bit of the air went out of the Flyers balloon there. But funny story about the Game 7, we traveled back, and so we're getting ready for the game, and I'm looking around, and I got no contacts. And so I go to the trainer, Bearcat, and says, Bear, did you put my contacts somewhere? I can't find them. And so we couldn't find them anywhere. And so I said, well, what the hell? And, I actually had a really good series against the Flyers. And I had the task of playing against Paul Holmgren and Bobby Clark's line. And Homer was one tough son of a gun, I'll tell you that. And but anyhow, so I started the game with no contacts. I was blind as a bat, and I'm going down blocking shots, and my timing's way off. I'm getting hit everywhere. And it was probably a good thing because I didn't ever think when I got the puck. I got the puck, I just off the boards and out, off the boards and out, off the boards and out. and it was hilarious. The guys were all laughing, and then Al Coates, who ended up being the president of the Flames many years later, he was like the PR guy.
Right.
He grabbed somebody and went to Will's Eye Hospital. And it's an eye hospital, and broke into the hospital. He didn't break into the hospital; it was open, but he got into where they stored their contacts, and he got into the cabinet, broke into the cabinet, and he got me a pair of contacts. And so there's a video around somewhere of me sitting on the bench with my oversized hands and one finger trying to put the contact in my eyes during the period. But anyhow, it's one of those things. It was pretty tense at the time, but you look back, and I saw Al Coates this past summer, and we were laughing about. He'd be put in jail now for heaven's sake, breaking into a lab. So anyhow, it was pretty funny. Well, we beat the
Well,
Flames, and the Flames beat the Flyers, and played Minnesota the next round, which you probably are going to talk about. But anyhow, the monkey was off the Flames' back, and I tell you what, that first year in Calgary, we played in the Calgary Corral. The boards are about 10 feet tall, and but what a great little environment. Uh, our home record was impeccable. We only lost 5 games at home that year. But anyhow, it was the fans embraced us, and they still are the talk of the town in Calgary, and it's great to see. I have 4 children, and one of my kids lives in Calgary, so we're there often to visit, and so it's really cool. I get to see my son and his family and the grandkids, but I also get to see a bunch of the Flames alumni.
well, 22 years old, you're named captain of the Flames, which was probably unheard of at that particular time. How did that come about? I mean, you had some veterans on the team.
Well, I don't know how it come about, and they pulled me aside the one day. I had been captain in junior with the London Knights for 2 years, and I my first 2 years in Atlanta were pretty rock solid, and so I'm sure they wanted to turn the page away from. Um, I want to say failures in Atlanta, but uh, they're back in a Canadian city. There was lots of enthusiasm. And so I think they just wanted to turn the page and step forward with a younger version. And at that time, as I said, my first 2 years in Atlanta were pretty solid. And so things looked very bright for the team and very bright for myself. And I'm not a flashy guy. I lead by example. I work hard, et cetera, et cetera. And so um, I guess I was the fit. They thought it was the right fit at the right time. And I was pretty proud to be captain.
Despite the heist by Al Coates, it's amazing that the contacts actually worked. But
Yeah.
obviously they did, and the Flyers were taking notice of your work against them because in the off season they made a captain for captain swap, you for Mel Bridgman, which was unheard of at the time. I don't really think it's ever happened before or since. How
Yeah,
did that
it
happen?
actually, um, well, it happened the next year, November 11th. I remember that because it's Remembrance Day in Canada and Veterans Day down here. It was the day the trade
Right.
came through.
Okay.
And
Mid-season.
at the time, we had a lot of injuries to our center iceman in Calgary. And at the same time, the Flyers had a number of injuries to their defensemen, and including Bob Daly, who had went into the boards, broke his ankle, and ended up being career-ending. And so there wasn't much talk in the paper about a trade or anything like that. So it's not like you're walking around on eggshells. And obviously, um, you know, I I assumed I was safe, type of thing. But I was always one to get to the dressing room early, and I got in early one time, and um, Bearcat, he was a trainer, says, "Hey, Marshy, Cliff wants to see you up in his office." So I didn't think anything of it, and headed up to Cliff's office thinking, oh, he wants to talk the game or whatever, blah, blah, blah. So I head in and sit down, and he said, well, we've made a trade, and we traded you to Philadelphia. And I once again, I don't even know if I heard the rest of it, but I cried like a baby, for heaven's sakes, because I mean I'd never been traded before, and it was somewhat of a shock. And like I said, I cried like a baby. It was pretty emotional. Like, back to the room, and I'd leave, and everyone's going like, "What's going on? What's wrong?" And so I said, "I was traded. See you later." And you leave, and you basically get on the plane, and you go to your next city. And once again, and it was different back then than it is when a player gets traded in the modern sports. And so anyhow, what's cool, and I tell people about it, is yes, it's disappointing. And as I just said, I cried like a baby. But what's cool is when you leave your dressing room and then you walk into your new dressing room, it's basically the same 20 guys. Hockey is different than than the other sports. They're there to support. Your teammates are fabulous in the world of sports. The dressing room, you've heard it a million times. When players retire, they miss the dressing room. The dressing room is special, and you walk into the dressing room, and everyone's there with open arms. Then you get on the ice, then you practice, and basically everything is normal. What's good about it being traded mid-season, um, is I got traded, showed up, had one practice on a Wednesday, then played Thursday night. So everything was cool because you're back playing the game of hockey. And you get traded in the summer, you got a lot of time to think about it, and this and this. And I don't think when a player gets traded now, the impact is it was different back then because we really did play for the logo, the name on the front, not the name on the back. And and I'm not saying that to be critical. It's just that modern sports is different because of free agency, and player movement, and something goes wrong. How many players? I want to be traded. Okay, we'll trade you. And something goes wrong again. Oh, I want to be traded. And then they're traded. So there's not the sense of loyalty, or there's not the sense of belonging. And so the emotion is different when a modern day player gets traded or signed as a free agent. But back then, I tell you what, it was an emotional time. And my new teammates in Philadelphia, they welcomed me with open arms. And the one thing I remember about my first game as a Flyer, and we were playing the Hartford Whalers, was them damn Cooperalls that we had to wear. Holy man, were they terrible! So anyhow, there you go. We won the game against Hartford. I got second star, but the Cooperalls were terrible.
Yeah, slipping and sliding everywhere, if I recall, right?
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Well, that was a big thing. Is I was a shot blocker before shot blocking became a stat, for heaven's sakes. And with the old wool socks that we used to wear, is when you went down to block a shot, that was part of your timing because the wool socks working on the ice, you didn't slide. And the first time I went down to block a shot with these Cooperalls on, it was near the start of the period, and so the ice was still a little bit fresh and wet and slippery. And I went down and I slid. And I go, holy shit! And then you got to cover your face because the puck hits you
Right.
usually in the body, and all of a sudden I'm sliding out of position. So anyhow, I didn't particularly like the Cooperalls.
Interesting stat that year because it was the midseason trade. 83 games you played in the 81-82 season. I don't know if anybody's ever done that before in a regular season. I think that might be a record.
Yeah, I didn't get paid any extra for those extra games either. But actually, I saw that in the Guinness World Records in the book that one time, and I should have bought the darn book. I don't know why I didn't, because not every day you get mentioned in the Guinness Book of World Records, because I ain't gonna go do anything stupid to get mentioned in the darn thing. But anyhow, it was all good. I remember the Flyers, our first game back to the Corral against Calgary. It was a shootout, and Flyers won 9-8, 9-8, believe that.
Oh,
And I scored the winning goal, the ninth goal. Phil Russell was the defenseman. I came down and I shot it, and I beat Patty Riggin on the glove side. Like he was an opposite, right-handed goalie. and I beat him with a shot. And once in a while, when I see Riggs, I remind him of that. But it was you always want to play good against your former team, but to score the ninth goal in a 9-8 game was kind of fun.
Well, I mean, for a guy who scored 23 goals or whatever it is for your entire career, I think you probably remember most of them. I'm going to guess, if not all of them. But you had a great 7-year run in Philly. It turned out to be a wonderful trade for you and the team. Of course, you played a physical game, but you stayed healthy. At one point, you suited up for 257 consecutive games. Now, how do you do that playing the kind of physical game you did? You know.
Well, one, you're kind of fortunate, and once again, back then, I think we played through a few bumps and bruises and injuries that perhaps a modern day athlete wouldn't. But yeah, you're right. The time in Philly, the 7 years here was wonderful. It was great for me. I've quite often said that um, it took the trade to Philadelphia, and for me to walk into the dressing room and have a teammate like Bobby Clark and a Bob Kelly and a Bill Barber and Jimmy Watson, and the list goes on and on. Walking in the dressing room was an eye opener for me, and I quite often said when I speak around that it wasn't until my time as a Flyer that I really began to understand what it took to be a National Hockey League player, and I was very fortunate. I was a good player, but there's lots of good players, and my time in Philadelphia made me a better player, made me a gooder player.
A gooder.
And yeah, and my time in Philadelphia was wonderful. It was my first introduction to doing off ice training, which was normal back then. But the Flyers were ahead of the curve. They were the first team to hire a physical fitness trainer. Believe it or not, like now there's every team has a whole team of fitness
Hmm.
people to look after them. And so the Flyers hired Pat Croce to be their fit guy, and it was like a whole new world for me when I got exposed to that. And Mike Keenan was the coach, and we can tell all kinds of Mike Keenan stories. But the assistant coach and one of the coaches that I really like to give a shout out to when I have the opportunity is Coach by the name of Ted Sater. He was assistant
Hmm.
coach, and he worked a lot with me. And once I started getting in shape, I was all of a sudden able to do more because you're stronger, et cetera, et cetera. And I remember in LA, I asked if I could have breakfast with him, and sure. So we sat down, and I said to him, I says, Ted, I'm tired of being labeled the slow guy, the awkward guy. He can't skate, and therefore he cannot play in certain situations. So this was before Mike. This was before Mike Keenan. Ted was also the assistant coach for the years leading up to the Keenan years.
Hmm.
And a lot of times when it was a 3-on-3 or a 4-on-4, the current coach, it was Bob McCammon, he wouldn't play me. He didn't think I could play because I was slow and awkward and blah blah blah. So I said to Ted, I said, I'm tired of this. Like, can you help me? He says, yep, we'll start to work today in practice. And so he had me doing stuff and so on. He really worked with me at doing all these quick feet and jumps and strength training and all this kind of stuff. And it was really cool. And it really, really helped me once again take another step into my career, for my career. And then once Keenan came, Ted was still the assistant coach for 1 year, but once Mike came, I was ready, and I played a lot under Mike Keenan, and a lot of thanks goes to Ted Sater.
You guys had a really great run in Philly and came so close. But this Edmonton team seemed to get in the way. You made it to the Cup final a couple of times. How close were you? And how good were the Oilers?
Well, the Oilers were really good, and I think, in no disrespect to the dynasties of Montreal Canadiens and the early Toronto Maple Leafs, but I think it's the best team ever assembled for that duration of time. And one of the reasons I say that is Edmonton changed the way the game of hockey's played. This fast, free flowing back and forth, and even to watch them in a practice was intimidating because of the talent and the skill, and the pace of that practice was unbelievable. And so, yes, 1984-85, that was Mike Keenan's first year. We had one of the youngest teams in the NHL. We had 6 or 7 guys under the age of 21. The Sutter brothers and Murray Craven, Rick Tocchet, Derek Smith, Peter Zezel. And no one really picked us to do anything, if you will. And we ended up winning the President's Trophy. We ended up in the Stanley Cup Finals. We had a tremendous year. And every game was close in those Stanley Cup Finals, with the exception of the last one, which turned out to be a blowout. But could we have won that year? I think if we would have won one of those close games, we lost 4-1. If we would have won a second game, one of those close games, it might have been a different story. But then fast forward to 87, in a young Ron Hextall in net. We should have, could have, and we had an excellent chance to win Game 7. Edmonton was tight, nervous, didn't know what, they had blown the lead. They had the parade planned because they were ahead 3-1, and we come back and tied it. Game 6 here. They were up 3-1, and they were up 3-1 in Game 6, and we came back and won the game. J.J. Dagno scored the winning goal with a couple minutes left in the third, and oh my goodness, I thought the Spectrum roof was going to come down. It was so loud there. And talking to the people that run the Spectrum, they have all them dials back, so when the big rock concerts come in and it's too loud, they can tell them to turn down their tweeters or their Twitter, whatever, the woofers and all that stuff. They can turn them all down. And when JJ scored that goal, it was the loudest the Spectrum had ever been. And so it's just, so we go back for Game 7, and Edmonton is nervous and a little tight. We had some chances in the first period, and but then they shut us down. Once they got the lead, they shut us down pretty good. And then Glenn Anderson scored at the start of the third period, and it was pretty much over at that time, and which is very, very, very disappointing. Looking back, I never watched the end of the Stanley Cup. I don't watch any trophy presentations because I'm ticked, And this damn NHL network, Jesus Murphy, they keep showing they keep having the old time games, and people will call me now. They used to call me, now they'll send me a text. Hey, Game 7's on. I don't care. I know how it ends, for heaven. I don't want to watch it.
I was there.
Yeah. And so, but what a fabulous series. And you get talking to old time reporters that have covered a lot of hockey, and a lot of them will say that was the best series that has ever been played. And we came close. And but there's if people ask, okay, what was some of the highlights? I don't know if you'd call it a highlight, but they always ask what the highlight, and unfortunately, 2 of my highlights end on a sour note. Stanley Cup Finals twice, we lost both times, and but after Game 7, we chartered back, and we got back to Philadelphia, and I don't know how this happened, but the plane chartering back ran out of beer, and I remember saying to the people, like, if we win, we're going to drink a lot. If we lose, we're going to drink a lot. So, like, how could you run out of beer? And so, anyhow, I had my first experience with red wine. So we were drinking all the little minis on the plane, and we land, and my wife says, she picked me up and she says, "What the heck happened to you?" And I said, "What do you mean? Well, your lips are red, your tongue's red." And so we're all doing these interviews with the press, and if you look, all her teeth are red and her tongues are red. And anyhow, so from there, back in the day when you were eliminated, There was a sense of camaraderie and team bonding, if you will. That's a polite way of putting that. You went out for several beers and you just kind of commiserated or talked about the season. And it was a very unique time to be with your team after you were eliminated from the Stanley Cup playoffs. And in this case, losing Game 7, it really was a time for us to kind of be together, if you will. And so so I said to a bunch of the guys, okay, we're going from the plane. So we got back, I don't know, 5 a.m. I knew of a 24-hour bar that uh, wasn't far from our practice rink. And so I said, so let's head over to this bar. We'll have a couple beers and we'll sit around and talk. So a good majority of the guys came, and Clarkey was there and Mike Keenan was there. And so we're sitting in the Evergreen Tavern on the White Horse Pike. The sun comes up, and I said, we got to liven this place up. And so my wife's family is all very musical, 11 in the family, and they all play instruments. And the oldest 6 were in a band and blah, blah, blah. So I call them up. This is before cell phones, so I had to use the phone at the Evergreen Tavern. And so I call them up and say, bring your instruments over here. So by 8:00 or 30 in the morning, I had the band was there. Like, there was keyboards, there was drums, there was a saxophone player, and they're sitting there singing, playing songs, and we're sitting around the bar, and all the regulars were coming in because there's a lot of night workers. That's why the bars are open 24 hours. There's a lot of shift workers, a lot of dock workers, and all that kind of stuff. And so they're just getting off their regular night shift, and they're coming in for, in their case, their evening beer. Then they go home, and they're coming
Right.
in, and they go like, "What the heck is going on here?" Like, Bobby Clark's sitting at my bar, sitting in my stool, for heaven, and there's a live band playing. So anyhow, as disappointing it was when we get together and we talk, is I quite often tell that story with the red wine and then continuing the party. And I think it's almost, you're in a sense of denial. One, that the season's actually over, and two, that you lost. In our case, a very heartbreaking loss.
Yeah, but a lot of players came close, never got there. So it's
Yes.
not a trophy that everybody gets a chance to win. And excuse me, Mr. Clark, but you're on my stool. You'll have
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
to go.
Yeah.
So I think it was your son posted recently. I saw this is cool. So he posted that who was the guy who had the fewest goals of any player to suit up in 1,000 plus games, and proudly told us it was his father. Yeah, Brad Marsh. But you did have your offensive moments, right? Okay, your first game with the Maple Leafs, basically the hometown team, leading the rush here. Great drop pass. Mark Osborne buries it. You guys beat the Blues, and the first star of that game was, yes, indeed, Brad Marsh. Remember that night? Tell us about it. You do.
Oh, yeah. I remember quite a lot of people always comment about my big circle, and that's a pretty cool clip. And you don't realize that it was pretty hard to stay on that center ice ring there. Like, that's, you talk of modern hockey, the tight turns and how agile people are. That was pretty tough for me to get the crossovers going and not wipe out, for heaven's sakes. But
Yeah.
I often said in Philly, when I was a star, and like, it wasn't quite the same setup, and so often I would go across to the far blue line where we came out, and I put the big snow on the boards, and
Mm.
I always said, "Hey, I'm never a star. It's not very rarely that I got tapped to be one of the 3 stars." And so when I got to be a star, I celebrated, and it was a fun time, and I loved it. And I'm laughing watching me chugging soup. And actually, I'm surprised they went that way, because turning to my right was always hard for me. I got to go to the left.
Yeah, like Zoolander on the runway, you can only turn left. But you wouldn't have been able to do those beautiful circles if it wasn't for Ted Sater working with you, right? So
That's right. Yeah.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
So here's a good one for you. This is okay. Playoff time now, and Vinny Damphousse is going to drop for Brad Marsh. A cannon drive blows it past Curtis Joseph in the playoffs, no doubt. And how much fun was that?
That was pretty cool. That was pretty cool. And like I said, I didn't score often. When I scored, it was a big celebration. And I'll tell you a funny story is, you young kids and they're playing and they always like the goalies. And I remember we had a goalie book in our house and Eric and Patrick, Victoria and Madeline, they're my kids. And so I'm reading them the book and it's the goalie book. And at that the kids think you're great. They don't know that you can't really shoot the puck or you didn't score or whatever. And so I'm reading it's all the best goalies, and the first goalie was Patrick Waugh. And, did you score against him, Dad? And I actually did, so I wasn't lying to my
Wow.
kids. And I said, yeah. Then the next one was Ed Belfort. Did you score against him? Yeah. And then when you showed the Curtis Joseph, he was in there. I said, "Do you score against him?" Yeah. And then I just closed the book's over. I said, "You can't go on this." But anyhow, like I said, it's you score, and I always talk about you know in retirement. Obviously, like everybody's important to the team, and part of Eric's post that he put out there is my lack of goal scoring ability and the number of games that I played. And I never put two and two together, but with all these analytic persons, I guess someone came up with it. And I was speaking at somewhere, and that's how the guy introduced me. It was almost like he was introducing me as I'm not really very good. And I got
Uh-huh.
up to the plate. I just about drilled the guy. But anyhow, I turned it into, yes, I didn't score, but everybody on the team is important. Everybody contributes. Everybody is part of the success or the failure of the team. And I think that's why players like myself are so well respected within the dressing room, because your teammates know the value that you bring to the team.
Right. Now, I was going to get at this just in a little bit later, but I could touch on it now. There's of course the Norris Trophy has always gone to the player who kind of combines defense with offense, and maybe more so leans towards offense. There has been a move afoot, I suppose, to bring in a secondary defenseman award. Would you be in favor of that for somebody, player like yourself, who was a stay-at-home defender? I mean, listen, you had 1,241 penalty minutes. You blocked shots. You kept the front of the net clear. You hit a lot of players. You pounded some guys, and but you didn't get recognized. Those types of players don't get recognized. Would you be in favor of an award that does recognize those players?
100%, and especially when they have one for the defensive forward.
Hmm.
Why there isn't one for defensive defenseman, especially in this day and age, not all for it. And I don't know if it'll ever come about, but um, all for it, because if you look at the NHL, and then if you look at the 16 teams that make the playoffs, then it goes to 8, then it goes to 4, then it goes to 2. The rock of all those teams that make the playoffs and then continue to 8-4-2 is the defenseman. And yes, the offensive defenseman jumps into play and gets the point. Great. But they always talk about the rock that's in looking after his own end, or the shutdown guy that is playing against the other top line. 100% all for that. And I don't know how the heck you would ever get it included, but maybe we can start the charge right now.
Let's do it. I mean, that's an award that you might have won a couple of times. You know what I mean? I'm serious.
Well,
You might have won it.
I I don't know about that, but like I said, they should be recognized, and because they do now lean more towards the offensive guys, and rightfully so, because they do they're pretty flashy when they play, and they do change the course of the game because of their offensive capabilities. But how many cups would have Montreal not won if they didn't have Bob Gainey? what did he win the defenseman award? I'm
Mm-hmm.
sorry, the
Mm-hmm.
Ford Award. I don't know, 8
Selkie.
times in a row.
Selkie.
The Selkie, there you go. And then
Yeah.
they Guy
Yeah.
Carbonneau, who won it several years in a row as well. And I think it's very important, and they should be recognized.
Yeah. I mean, the Habs aren't winning those cups without gaining Carbonell. I mean, it's just not happening. Yeah, because they need to shut down guys. They need guys like you to clear the front of the
Yeah,
net. The Flyers aren't going to the Stanley
yeah,
Cup final
yeah. And
without Brad Marsh
the
there.
Habs aren't winning any cups anytime soon either.
No, that's true. That's true. That's
Yeah,
true. Although
yeah.
they do have
No
some good kids,
disrespect to the
Suzuki
Habs
and
fan, because
Caulfield, and but there's some
yeah,
talent there. But yeah, they're a ways away. Okay, you get
yeah.
speaking of ways away, you end up after a trip to Detroit. You're in Ottawa now for their inaugural season. What was that experience like being part of that Senators inaugural season?
Well, you know what? It was a tough year because we were an expansion team, and the rules for expansion back then were not the rules for the Vegas team, and nor
Hmm.
the Kraken. And so
Seattle.
basically, yeah, Seattle. Basically, the rules back then is uh, it was like going to the thrift store to
Yeah.
purchase something, and we had a ragtag group of guys there. At one time, we had 13 former number one picks playing with the Senators, which some people might say that weren't real up on hockey knowledge. Oh, geez, you guys should be good. Well, there was a reason why all those 13 number one picks were discarded, because they didn't quite pan out. And unfortunately, that's the nature of the 18-year-old draft. Most players do not succeed because so many things could happen from 18 to
Hmm.
20 years old. I was a
Hmm.
20-year-old draft, and you're more of a young man than a young kid. But uh, we had a great group of guys in Ottawa. There was never any infighting, never bickering. It was a great group. We stayed together. We realized that we were behind the 8 ball for a number of reasons. Uh, but the bottom line is we weren't good enough to compete against the other teams. And as I quite often say when I'm speaking and someone asks me, it says, "Okay, who's here is good at math?" And so we played 80 games. Okay, what's 80 times 2? 160. So there's a potential for 160 points. It might have been an 82 game schedule, so that's 100, 108, 80,
64. Like
164
64.
points. Yeah, 164 points that one could attain. Okay, what's 9 times 2? 18. And back then there was ties. What's 3 times 1? 3. What's 18 plus 3 is 21. Okay, minus 164 minus 21 freaking points. Do the math. We weren't any good, so don't ask me how the season was. It was dismal, for heaven's sakes. And like I said, it was the Ottawa fans were tremendous. Every game was sold out. They were happy to have NHL hockey back in the city. They knew it was going to be a long process. They knew it was going to take a while. They came, they cheered us on, they cheered the visiting team on. I remember we lost to the New York Rangers one time. It was 2-1. We had the lead, and the Rangers, they come back, and they were a powerhouse at that time, and we lost 2-1. We got a freaking standing ovation going off the ice because we worked right to the end, and they were wonderful. And I quite often say, if you could write a last chapter to a book, if I were to write a book, which I'm not going to write about my career, the last chapter about my hockey career was wonderful, even though it was such a dismal year for the team overall. To be back playing in Canada, in the nation's capital, the fans loved us. And I wore number 14, and for whatever reason, Section 14 adopted me, led by Barry Bree from Renfrew, Ontario. And they started cheering for me. Then they're handing out all these signs, Brad Marsh this and Brad Marsh this, and Section 14 and Renfrew. They had started the Brad Marsh fan club, and it just went crazy. And next thing you know, Ron McLean and Hockey Night in Canada is in Renfrew, Ontario, doing a story on me and Renfrew, and they redid the signs going into the town. It was Renfrew, Ontario, population, and home of the Brad Marsh fan club. And I went, holy moly, like what the heck is happening here? And so, like I said, it was a wonderful year for myself. Looking back, they didn't want me to play next year, and I went to work with the Ottawa Senators. But this is a funny story and a very true story. So it was a dismal year, like I said, and I didn't score a goal. And so we come down to the last game. We're playing the Boston Bruins, and I hadn't scored. And so all the guys and everybody wanted me to score a goal, including myself. It would have been nice to score a goal.
Yeah.
And so we're playing the Bruins. And prior to that, believe it or not, there was another team that was equally as bad as us, the San Jose Sharks at the time. Was it San Jose?
Yeah.
Anyhow, it came down, and Bruce Firestone, who was the owner, he made a comment that we didn't want to win the game because they wanted the first overall pick, which in that case was Alexander Dake.
Yeah.
And every time you can't say that, because if we win the game, we leapfrog over and we end up with the second pick. And so anyhow, the game's played and we lose. And as I said, everybody's trying to get me a goal. The coach has me on the power play, and so on and so on. And I'm forecheck, and I'm in front of the net on the power play and all this kind of stuff. So in the summertime, I didn't know about this. Norm McIver, who was one of our defensemen on the team, he was probably our best player on the team, Norm. He got called by the NHL offices and Gary Bettman. They were doing an inquiry into Bruce Firestone's comments about they didn't want to win the game. And the whole inquiry was around why Brad Marsh was on the power play. Were you really trying to throw the game? Because the NHL looks at my stats. Oh, they're throwing the game. They put Brad Marsh out on the power play. Well, and Norm McIver's sitting there, you got to be kidding me. Like, we were just trying to get him a goal. So, anyhow, there you go.
Well, okay, you did score a goal that year because we haven't. This is from the All-Star game in 1993 in Montreal. You're representing the Senators, and you're going to join the rush here. Head to the net for the redirect, and tell us about that wonderful maneuver. And then you went and grabbed the puck after that, which I don't blame you, of course. Do you still have it?
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah. There, just a minute. Just a minute. There it is, right there.
All right.
On the old office wall. Actually,
Beautiful.
I got 3 pucks on my wall. One was for my first game, and I had the All-Star game goal, and then the puck from my last year on the wall. So anyhow, Mark Recchi set me up, and I've seen Rex. He was a Flyer, of course, and I've seen him a number of times, and we just retired his jersey here, and I keep telling him I owe you a beer. I owe you a beer for that. But no, that was wonderful. That was wonderful. I actually ended up with a goal and an assist in that game. And the next day, I got a couple funny stories about that. The next day, we played the next night. So we go out on the ice, and a big sign up, All-Star game, and it's got Marsh, 1 goal, 1 assist, 2 points. Gretzky, 0, 0, 0. I mean, Wayne, played in a million games. And so he just dials it in, and you can't blame the guy for heaven's sakes. But a funny story about the All-Star game, and they have the infamous skills competition uh, prior to the All-Star game. And so everybody's in there in the dressing room, and the coach comes in and assigns what little skill you're doing, fastest skater and all, or this, and this. Well, Scotty Bowman's the coach, and once again, when I speak and I say this obviously in jest, like, who's the best coaches of all time, and it's Scotty Bowman's name always comes up, and then I always say he doesn't know anything about hockey. And of course, that's like gasped in the audience. And I said, hear me out. So the coach assigns the players to the various skills for the competition.
Mm-hmm.
I guess Scotty didn't read my stats. He put me in the accuracy shooting competition. Well, if you remember the accuracy shooting competition, you play in the slot and you get a pass from the left and then a pass from the right, and there's 4 targets in the corners of the net. Oh my God, I'm, nervous to say the least. Like, how the heck? Like, what? How could the hell did he put me in the accuracy shooting contest? And so it comes to my turn, and I'm shaking like a leaf. And so I'm standing in the slot, and the first pass comes, and I miss the target. Okay, relax. The next pass comes. I miss the target. Then the next pass, and then miss the target. And then I'm really, okay, I'm tight. And it is in Montreal, as you know, and the murmur starts going in the audience because no one really attention until they have to pay attention. The murmur sounded like Jeopardy. It started Jeopardy. And then I missed the 4th, the 5th, the 6th, and it comes to loud. It's getting loud, and then all eyes are now watching accuracy shooting. So anyhow, I go 0 for 10, and oh my God, this what the like how Scotty Bowman, like what the heck are you doing? So anyhow, needless to say, Friday night was not a good night, and disappointing. But you try and laugh it off because everybody was being good about it, and ha ha ha, Marshy, like what the hell, you weren't going to hit a target anyhow. Don't worry about it. But no one likes to be embarrassed or anything like that. And so anyhow, the next day we play the next day, I score and assist, and everything's good, and everyone's forgot about the shooting contest. But then the following day, I go back to practice, and I go into the dressing room, and this refers back to how great the teammates are in the dressing room is, and the guys have a huge, huge target sitting right in my stall, and they got it all colored out. Huge target. Like, okay, Marshall, maybe you can hit this one. And, but anyhow, it was all good. So my All-Star weekend was highs and lows, and obviously the high overshadowed the low. And so anyhow, it was pretty special. Actually, it was pretty special to be. We got to dress. We were kind of the home team. We got to dress in the dressing room in the old Montreal Forum, which was pretty cool with all the history in there. It was. People don't realize now in modern day sports, like every arena is the same. They're beautiful, don't get me wrong, but the history just seems to be missing. And what an honor it was to be in the Montreal dressing room with all that history. And I tell you, as a kid growing up, from my era, you remember the first time you played in Maple Leaf Gardens and first time you played in the Montreal Forum. What a special feeling that was.
Yeah, I think is it from failing hands we pass the torch? Is the senator?
Yeah. It's almost like they're looking at you. They're looking at you when you're tying your skates up because they got a little tilt on the pictures of each one that's in the Montreal Hall. Look down at you. So it's pretty cool. Yeah.
So word has it that the Senators wanted you to try playing with a helmet. Is that true? I mean, you were the last, I think, after McTavish hung around for a little while after you did, but you were the second last player to not wear a helmet.
Yeah.
Is that true?
Well, it wasn't that they tried. It was the owner, Bruce Firestone. I don't know what he was thinking, but um, he was overruled pretty quick. And a funny story about Craigie McTavish is, yes, he was the last, I was the second, and but we played minor hockey together all the way up at Southwest London Bobcats, and
Wow.
we got the team picture. I was talking to one of the players, Doug Burke, who was on the team um, the other day, and took a picture and I texted him of picture of the Southwest London Bobcats. So anyhow, yeah, me and Craigie, we didn't grow up together as in the same school, but we played for the Southwest London Bobcats. So it was cool. Old Crapper, that's what we used to call him, Crapper.
A pair of Bobcats, and you had the buckets on too, I would think.
Oh yeah,
Back in
back in
minor
that.
hockey.
But
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Yeah.
yeah, if you see it, but it was used to be the 3-piece one.
Yeah, yeah,
And
yeah,
then
yeah.
a piece on the top, and then you used to wear a mouth guard, but then that would double as your chin strap too. It'd be just sitting on your chin. But anyhow, well, yeah.
What was it about wearing a helmet, not wearing a helmet that was a problem for you? And are you pleased that
Wasn't
you went
necess-
through your career like that? Was it a good idea?
wasn't wasn't necessarily a problem to to wear it or not wear it. But when I broke into the league in '78, most players did not wear a helmet, and
Mm,
you know actually, when I went to Atlanta, they gave me a helmet. It was a Winwell, and I wore it during training camp and exhibition, and actually the first couple games of the NHL season. But there was always, take the helmet off, take the helmet off, be like Bobby Bond and Alan Stanley, Tim Horton, and the guys,
yeah.
the defensemen that I grew up watching. And so I took the helmet off, and it stayed off. I was hit into the boards racing for the puck with Ray Bork and Cam Neely, 1988, and my head went into the old turnbuckle right between the benches there, and I had pretty good severe concussion,
Mm,
and so I wore a helmet for the rest of that season, and then the next year I was released and picked up by Toronto, and for when I went to Toronto, I said to my wife, "I'm going to take the helmet off." Because during my time of wearing the helmet, I was never hit with so many cheap shots, hits from behind, high
mm,
sticks, elbow, you name it, because it was just a different kind of respect when you have a helmet on. And so I took it off, and I didn't get hit. I shouldn't say I didn't get hit. I did, but nothing dirty like I experienced when I had the helmet on.
right. It's not like sliding along the ice in the Coop rolls and getting
Yeah, yeah,
taking one
exactly.
off the noggin, right?
Yeah.
Uh,
So the night that I got hit here in Philly, I went into the boards. Um, like, it was pretty bad. I'll have season ticket holders come up to me and says, "At that game, I thought you were dead," because there was a huge puddle of blood that formed because I got hit here, and then I fell back and I hit the back of my head
mm,
on the ice, and so there's two big gashes, and um, it was, you know, they take me off the ice in the stretcher. The whole place was quiet, and I tell people when we talk about it, like, this was before cell phones, and so it was somewhat of an emergency, but no one thought to put 10 cents in the payphone and call my wife. She was sitting at home. Eric was, well, I guess he would have been 2 years old, and she was pregnant with Patrick, our second,
mm.
and the neighbor come over and knocked on the door and says, "Mrs. Marsh, my dad tells me that you might need a babysitter." So anyhow,
Oh
Patty
boy.
comes to the hospital. The reason I'm telling you all this stuff is obviously I'm fine, but that was the same night Ron Hextall scored his first goal by a goaltender. And so I'm in the hospital, and they're doing all these tests and all that kind of stuff. And I think I'm okay. And the doctor comes in and says, "Ron Hextall just scored." And I'm going like, "Oh man, I must be really screwed up here." Like, goalie scored. And so anyhow, it's all fine. I came back way too early, played, and I was never, for the remainder of the year, I was never quite the same. and
Mhm.
then the Flyers put me on the waiver wire, and the thought process was they thought that my career was over and I was going to continue to decline because of the concussion, and
Mhm.
and then, I was talking about the teammates and how great they were, and this is another example. And so I was told that, talk about a shock. I was told by Bobby Clark, who was the GM, that they released me on the waiver wire. What? Because back in those days, if you go on the waiver wire, your career's done. That was the thought process, and they claimed Doug Sullivan on the waiver, and so when they claimed him, they had to release me. And so I go home, and next thing you know, the guys start coming over, bring a few beers. And my wife's family, as I said, she's got 10 brothers and sisters. And so they're there, and all my team's there. We're having a few beers. And then Mr. Snyder gave me a call and thanked me for being a Flyer. And then there's a feeble knock at the door, and it's, oh, who's that? And it was Bobby Clark, who had become
Mm.
good friends, a teammate, and then he was my boss as the general manager, and he let me go. Um, he says, "Is it okay if I come in?" And I said, "Ah, sure, come on in, Clark." And of course, he had the case of beer with him as well, and so it just ended up being a wonderful time of talking. And it wasn't, how could they do this to you and blah, blah, blah. It was
Mhm.
just talking, and it was great. And back then I had a 1972, when I got traded from Calgary to Philadelphia, I bought a pickup truck. It was a 1972 New Jersey Department of Highways pickup truck that they serviced the roads with. It was number 292, and that was stenciled on the doors, 292. And so once again, as an example, back then you just made your way to the next town that you were playing with. And so I was going to Toronto, and I loaded up the back of Old Yeller. That's what I called at the time. Old Yeller was yellow, and loaded it up with stuff. And my wife jumped in the front seat, and we drove to Toronto to start my career as a Maple Leaf. The truck broke down outside of Binghamton. The water pump broke, so I just limped off the highway, got the water pump replaced, and away I went. And Toronto, just press hungry. They're there taking pictures of me showing up in this old yellow beat up pickup truck, and they're going, "What the hell is this?" Anyhow, it was my life, my career as a Maple Leaf was wonderful to put on the Maple Leaf jersey after that being my favorite team as a kid, as I was saying. And never forget the first time I put on the Maple Leaf. It was in Boston, exhibition game number 3. And the old Boston Garden was a lot of personality, terrible rink, but you had like 5 little dressing rooms to get dressed in. They were just all connected. And so I got one. I got ready early, got my jersey on. No, I took my jersey into the bathroom, and I put the jersey on in front of the mirror, and I stood there
Wow.
and looked at myself, and I said, "Man, this is pretty cool."
Yeah. Pretty awesome.
Yeah.
So you are now the director of community development of Flyers. What does that job entail?
Well, when I came down, I stayed in Ottawa for 22 years, mainly because we wanted our kids to kind of grow up like me, playing hockey outside in the winter climate and all that. So we stayed in Ottawa. I worked with the Senators. It was wonderful. I was director of team and business development there, and then Paul Holmgren, battled against him, and former teammate and good friend. He was the
Mhm.
president of the Flyers, and I always checked in with the Flyers when I'd come down in the summertime to visit the wife's family. And so anyhow, one thing led to another, and I accepted a job with the Flyers. And so now I'm vice president of community development and president of the Flyers Alumni. And so my thought is anything that happens outside of the rink, in this case, the Wells Fargo Center, is community development. And so, we do like every team does. We have school programs, minor hockey clinics, and all kinds of great things. Uh, but I also run our alumni. And our alumni is very active down here, very proactive and very active. We raise a lot of money through our different events, and we have several initiatives, pet projects, if you will, that we do in the area, and it's a lot of fun working with the old alumni guys.
And tell us a little bit about the Philly Disabled Veterans hockey team.
Well, one of the things that our alumni does is, along with the Flyers, is we have the Flyers Warriors, which is a hockey team that is made up of disabled veterans. And we started the program with a simple learn to skate way back in 2018, December of 2018. And then from there, there was some interest to keep it going because it was just, learn to skate, come out and get a Flyer jersey, et cetera, et cetera. Um, we had our first practice here at Wells Fargo, and we had a handful of guys come out, and it's just blossomed into this wonderful program for the disabled vets. They're all standing disabled, so there's not sled hockey or any. They got all their limbs. They have various other injuries and so on and so on. And what's happened is we created this hockey program that has blossomed into this wonderful sense of community where the players, the veterans, and their families have a newer sense of belonging. So now, basically, the Flyers Warriors hockey program is improving lives of veterans and their families through the sport of hockey. We practice once a week. We go in various tournaments, veteran tournaments. And it's not beer hockey. It's very serious hockey. And we've grown from a learn to skate program. We have enough players for 5 teams now. And when we go to the national championships, we'll take 4 teams of veterans with us and we compete. And over the years, since we become this organization, we've won 6 national championships at various levels. We have tier 1, 2, 3, and 4. And the tier 4 is they've never played before and first time on the ice. It's wonderful to see these guys. But as I said, we've created a sense of community where the veterans now can sit in the dressing room or wherever we're getting together and share stories. And because when you live in suburbia, you're not telling your neighbor what you experienced and what you went through and the problems that you're having in retirement. And so now they've come together, and it's been a wonderful, wonderful program for the players, but more importantly, a real strong program for their wives or for their partners, because quite often, and the kids as well, quite often, they don't understand what's going on. But now, because we have this sense of community within the Warrior program, it's been a wonderful program and a lot of fun. So I coach the teams, I blow the whistle, and I skate the crap out of them, and it's great. They love it. I bring out my best Mike Keenan drills, and it's a lot of fun. And it's a lot of fun. So that's one of the things our alumni does, and actually, another project that is really cool is we have Every Child Deserves a Bike. I'm a big bike rider. I still ride lots of miles I put in. I went to a charity event one night, and they presented an adaptive bike to a disabled child. And like I'm looking like, this is incredible. So anyhow, make a long story short, I reached out to the charity and says, okay, our alumni wants to buy a bike. And then I said, okay, we're going to create a program. And so we've donated outside my office here. I've got 2 bikes that we're donating this weekend to kids. And so that will be I believe our 37th and 38th adaptive bike that we've purchased. The bikes cost between $5,000 and $7,000 each because they're specifically made to every child's disability, to whatever their needs are. The bike is custom made for that, and so the bike helps them build some strength, helps them build some core balance, and it's really cool. And when you can give a bike to a young child that has never had the opportunity to ride with their brothers or sisters, friends, it's unbelievable. And so anyhow, I could go on and on. Our alumni, we continue to make a difference here in the Philadelphia area. And we love putting smiles on people's faces, because sometimes our NHL team, we're in a rebuilding, and so there's not a lot of smiles. So that's where our alumni comes in.
Yeah.
They put smiles on all the Flyers fans' faces. So it's great, and we have such a great working relationship with the NHL Flyers and the management and the ownership, and we're just Flyers organization is very strong. It was under Mr. Snyder, and it continues to be. Continues to be one of the model franchises in the league, and we have a great working relationship with them.
Great job. That's a great job, Brad. Okay, so we're partnered with a group called Believe, Become, BU. It's a mentorship program for kids from 10 to 17. What's the message that you would have for kids who might be struggling to find their way these days?
Listen,
Hmm.
surround yourself with positive people, and do whatever you can to stay away from the bad apples, if you will. And the big one, and they're 10 to 17, they are smart enough and mature enough, some more mature than others, to understand the difference from right and wrong. And I would encourage them to seek out the right and focus on the right, and keep your focus on what you're going to do. And don't let anything stray you from what you set your mind out to do.
Block out all those distractions, right? Yes, sir.
Yeah, and it's tough. It's tough. I know that
Yeah.
it's tough, and I quite often talk about the dressing room, and the dressing room is no different than the office, and it's no different than the classroom. You look at a classroom or a dressing room, and you have your leaders, and you have your bad apples, and you have a lot of people in the middle. And your leadership has to be strong enough to bring the people in the middle to your side. If you get in a position where the people in the middle are listening to the bad apples, you're going to have trouble. And you can look at any pro sports team, and that equation can suit them. And if they're struggling, they probably got too many bad apples. And so with your kids, the message is understand what's right and what's wrong, and focus on the right.
Yeah, it can be done. Listen, Brad, thank you so much for taking this time to join us. It's been great. Really enjoyed this. Thank you.
Thank you. Appreciate it. It was very good, and all comes from a simple post that my son made, and it was wonderful reading some of the comments and the reaction, and so on. And one guy went to the same school as me, Brick Street, and he remembered sitting in the crowd listening to my speech. I won the speech competition, and he was commenting. He still remembered my speech. He was commenting on my speech. I said, "Holy moly, it's pretty cool that." So the whole media thing, it can be useful.
Right.
So anyhow, it was cool looking through the post, because and reading some of the comments, and they're all good. Nobody criticized for my lack of ability.
No, man, you had a lot of ability, no doubt about that. And
Yeah,
thanks again to Ted
yeah,
Sater for helping out a little bit,
yeah.
right? Yeah.
Ted's a good guy. Yes.
Yeah. All right. Thanks,
Anyhow,
buddy. Okay.
okay,
When we come back, we got a Grey Cup recap. Stick around. Thanks, Brad.
okay. Thanks, Joe. Enjoyed it. Thank you.
Addiction Rehab Toronto, Toronto's #1 alcohol and drug treatment center, saving lives, reuniting families. The only treatment center in the province to offer medical detox, treatment, sober living, and lifetime aftercare all in one place. Our unique and specialized programs are designed to equip our clients with the tools to successfully lead a life of dignity, respect, and purpose. Let us help save your life or your loved one's life. Call today for more information or to facilitate an intervention. 1-855-787-2424 or visit addictionrehabtoronto.ca.
The 111th edition of the Grey Cup game, an absolutely head-scratching stunner. We're talking crazy tunes here. How could the Argos possibly knock off the mighty Blue Bombers without their star quarterback? Well, Nick Arbuckle finally got his chance under the bright lights, and man, did he ever come through. Now, the Boatmen managed to keep it tight at the half. Maybe they were inspired by the Jonas Brothers, but they really went to work in the second half. Arbuckle, good protection, fires over the middle for Dejan Brissett. Brissett hauls it in for the touchdown. But the big story of this game was defense. Zach Collaros was intercepted 4 times. Robert Priestler is going to take this one back for the pick 6. A nightmare night for Collaros, but not for Nifty Nick. He was the game MVP. The Argos win their 19th Grey Cup title, 41-24.
Parents, what's the biggest fear for kids 10 to 14? A future they think they can't handle. At Believe, Become, Be You, we know confidence in the future is a habit we can build. Our course doesn't just prepare kids for the future, it seeds them with skills they will use now. For a limited time, the I Believe in Me Foundation is offering the first 1,000 kids and their parents 1 year free access. This priceless opportunity will save you over $2,000. This isn't just a course. It's a journey in developing life-enhancing skills that will grow with your child, fostering gritty minds, creative futures, and better bonds. Get signed up now at BelieveBecomeBeYou.com. That's BelieveBecomeBeYou.com.
Hi, I'm Joe Tilley, and I want to tell you about the painting pros. Patrick and his crew recently came into my home and they painted the walls, they added some color. It's fantastic, and I can't be more satisfied with the work they did. That crew is tremendous. They were professional, they were courteous, they were respectful, and they did a fantastic job. Look at that. Look at that color. I just can't stress enough how satisfied we truly are with Patrick and his crew. For all your painting needs, go with the pros.
And we want to thank all the folks who make the show possible. These are friends, trusted business associates, and all-around great people. We highly recommend them all. Thank you for your support of Canadian sports. A reminder that the show is available on iTunes, Spotify, Breaker, wherever you get your podcast from. Also, check out the show on YouTube. All of our past great shows are on there. Shorts, like and subscribe. It's absolutely free. Thanks once again to Brad Marsh for bringing the program. Thank you for watching. We'll see you next time.
Brian Gribben Insurance Planning, helping you solidify your financial future.
At BGIP, what we do that's unique in the marketplace is we show people how to spend and enjoy their money in the early years of retirement without the fear of running out. Also, we're able to do this without you having to change financial advisors. Please look us up at bgip.ca today. Let's book a 30-minute phone call to see how we can bring value to you and your family in your planning.
Call Brian today for all your retirement needs. We did. 905-686-5678.
MNP, a leading Canadian national accounting, tax, and business accounting firm. MNP proudly serves and responds to the need of their clients in the private, public, and nonprofit sectors. Through partner-led engagements, MNP provides a collaborative, cost-effective approach to do business and personal strategies to help people and organizations to succeed across the country and around the world. With local offices in Oshawa, Mississauga, Burlington, and more, their team is here to support you. Visit mnp.ca today to learn more. Rooted in 60 years of tradition, Sleepy Hollow is a private golf club with a friendly community of members just minutes from Toronto. With mature trees and rolling fairways, Sleepy Hollow provides a challenging and enjoyable experience for passionate golfers. Enjoy great golf, amazing dining, and a picturesque patio second to none. Visit sleepyhollowcountryclub.com. Joe Tilley here. My wife Penny Claire and I recently took an amazing trip to Egypt and Jordan with Trip Oppo. And here are our top 10 must-dos. Last but not least, we relaxed at a luxury resort and took a dip in the famous Dead Sea. This beautiful resort was a perfect way to cap off our incredible adventure in Egypt and Jordan. After days of exploring ancient ruins and bustling markets, it was wonderful to just kick back, put on a little mud, and soak up the sun by the Dead Sea. Oh, I almost forgot to mention the amazing cuisine in Egypt and Jordan. Don't forget to try the delicious local food like mouth-watering Egyptian barbecue. And the best part is that our Trip Oppo tour includes almost all of the meals, so you can indulge in the local cuisine without worrying about opening your wallet. I would highly recommend that you book your next trip through Trip Oppo. Call them today.
Guests on Joe Tilley Sports receive a gift certificate from Classica Imports. Top of the line imported men's clothing. Check out the Classica Essential Collection now. Go to shopclassica.com.